Derek Cole had walked into her office like he still owned her career. "Drop the meritless project," he said. "Step back from the sector for a while." Jordan looked at him. He sat there like she had never left. "Before you prove anything in court," he continued, "we'll bury your company in legal fees so deep you won't make it to a verdict." Jordan didn't respond. Derek Cole had always preferred destroying things quietly. He moved closer. Too close. His hand slid lightly along her arm. Familiar, unwelcome. "You look better than I remember." Jordan didn't move. "If you wanted to make this easier on yourself?" His thumb paused against her sleeve. "Dinner. One night. I might." She slapped him. It wasn't planned. The sound cracked through the room, sharp, immediate. For a second, neither of them moved. He didn't flinch. He only smiled, slow, vicious. 3 weeks earlier, the elevator opened into the penthouse at 7:14 a.m. Jordan Sanders was already late, already caffeinated, already arguing with her laptop bag about whether 3 client folders, a portable hard drive, constituted a reasonable carry. They did not. "Don't say anything," she said. Jung-min, leaning against the kitchen island in a white dress shirt that was doing deeply unfair things to his shoulders, looked at her over the rim of his coffee cup. He said nothing. His expression said quite a lot. "I know." She wedged the hard drive in sideways. "I'm getting a bigger bag." "You said that Monday." "I'm saying it again on Thursday. It's called persistence." The corner of his mouth moved. That almost smile she'd been cataloging for months now. The one that existed in the narrow territory between amusement. Something warmer, something he still didn't have a word for or, if he did, hadn't said yet. He set his cup down, crossed to her in 3 unhurried steps, took the laptop bag from her hands, rearranged its contents with a quiet efficiency that suggested he found disorder personally offensive. Handed it back. "Thank you," she said, with dignity. He pressed his mouth to her temple. "Go." Jordan's firm occupied a 3rd-floor suite in a converted brick building in the West Loop. 3 rooms, south-facing windows, a waiting area she'd furnished herself from a place on Randolph Street that sold restored mid-century pieces at prices that made her briefly reconsider her life choices. Her name was on the glass door in clean sans serif, Sanders Strategy Group. Small. Genuinely small. Built from 6 months of her own money, her own contacts. A reputation she'd rebuilt piece by piece after Larson, Abbott, and Cole tried to erase it. She hired Jane in August, a razor-sharp recent grad who dealt with admin the way most people dealt with breathing. Automatically, efficiently, without fanfare. With Jane in place, Jordan could finally do the work instead of just surviving it. Then the meritless holdings bid landed in her inbox. She almost didn't submit a proposal. She almost didn't submit. Meritless wasn't her scale. Not yet. She sent the proposal anyway. 2 minutes before she could change her mind. They called 3 days later. She was in the middle of a client call when Jane appeared in her doorway mouthing meritless, with an expression of barely contained urgency. Jordan wrapped up the call in under 4 minutes, a personal record. Was on with Meritless's office by 11:30. The meeting was set for the following Wednesday. She knew the building. She hadn't let herself think about that until she was in the lobby, watching the elevator numbers descend. The particular quality of the marble, the particular arrangement of the atrium suddenly placed her with the accuracy of a pinpoint. She'd been in this building before. Years ago. A different city, a different version of herself. The elevator opened on 12. She stepped out. Jordan Sanders. The man coming down the hallway toward her was smiling. The specific smile of someone genuinely pleased to see a person they'd expected not to. Brian Collins looked roughly the same as he had in the years before her Chicago exile. Tall, measured, the kind of unhurried competence that came with having been good at his job for a long time. Brian. She took his extended hand. Managing director. Congratulations. A year ago. He shook his head. I've been trying to find you since you left. Nobody would tell me where you went. A pause. I always thought what happened was wrong. She held that information carefully, the way you held things that might break. Well, she said, I'm back. She won the contract 2 weeks later. Jung-min took her to dinner at a restaurant she recognized from Chicago Magazine's last notable feature. The kind of place that had a coat check. No prices on the menu. He ordered wine she didn't know. Let her talk for 45 uninterrupted minutes about Brian Collins. The scope of the project. What it meant for the firm's profile. He watched her the entire time with that particular attention he had. The steady, unhurried focus of a man who found her the most interesting thing in the room without apparently needing to announce it. "You're proud of me," she said, somewhere around the dessert menu. He looked at her across the candlelight. "When have I not been?" She felt it move through her chest, warm and disorienting. They were not, technically, people who used words like together or mine, except that he did use mine. She had stopped correcting him. She had a key to his penthouse. He had cleared an entire closet for her without mentioning it. The not naming of it was becoming increasingly implausible. Jung-min. "Not yet," he said quietly. She paused. "When you're ready," he said. "Not because the moment is convenient." He reached across the table and turned her hand palm up, his thumb tracing the inside of her wrist. "I'm not going anywhere." There was something in the way he said it. Not reassurance, not promise. Certainty. The kind that didn't depend on whether she believed him. She looked at him, his cheekbones, the ink visible at his open collar. Thought. "There is no version of the story where I don't love you." She hadn't said it. She would. Not yet. But soon. Jane knocked twice before opening Jordan's office door, which meant she'd already tried to stop whoever was behind her. The door opened fully. Derek Cole walked in like the office belonged to him, which was, Jordan had always thought, his defining characteristic. The complete assumption of ownership over every space he entered. He was 53 now, still groomed to the point of aggression, still carrying the particular confidence of a man who had never genuinely faced consequences. Jordan. He looked around the office with an expression of theatrical concern. "Smaller than I expected." She stood. "You need to leave." "I need 5 minutes." He smiled. The smile hadn't changed. "You should hear what I have to say before you make decisions you can't take back." He sat down in the chair across from her desk, without being invited. Jordan looked at Jane, who was still in the doorway with her phone half raised. "It's okay," Jordan said. "Not because it was. Give us 5 minutes." The door closed. "The meritless contract," he said. "That's a problem for us. I don't work for you. You signed an agreement." "Not one I ever saw." A small smile. "Interpretations vary." He let the silence stretch, then added, almost casually, "You didn't acquire that contract cleanly." Jordan's gaze didn't shift. "Meritless was never your client." "No," he agreed. "But Brian Collins is leading the project." A beat. "And Brian Collins built his career at our client Ratner Corp while you were managing their portfolio." She didn't respond. "We'd argue the relationship carried over. That the bid wasn't entirely independent." He shrugged. "Maybe it holds up. Maybe it doesn't." Another pause. "But before you prove anything in court," he said, softer now, "we'll have buried your company in legal fees so deep you won't make it to a verdict." Jordan looked at him. Really looked. At the man who had dismantled 6 years of her work with quiet precision. Was now sitting in her office, asking her to hand over what she'd rebuilt. "Drop the meritless project," he said. "Step back from the sector for a while. Let this settle. And if I don't." His smile thinned. "This isn't really about the contract." A beat. "It's about precedent." She said nothing. "We can't have people thinking they can walk away from Larson, Abbott and Cole, and succeed." His voice stayed calm. "You understand that." He stood. Came around the desk. Too close. His hand slid lightly along her arm. Familiar, unwelcome. "You know," he said, quieter now. "You look better than I remember." Jordan didn't move. "If you wanted to make this easier on yourself," his thumb paused against her sleeve. "Dinner. One night. I might." She slapped him. It wasn't planned. The sound cracked through the room, sharp, immediate. For a second, neither of them moved. He didn't flinch. He only smiled, a slow, vicious thing. Derek straightened slowly. Something in his expression shifted. Not anger. Not quite. Recognition. "Get out of my office," Jordan said. He adjusted his jacket. Stepped back. "You have until the end of the week," he said. "The project starts in 2. A pause. "Think carefully." And then he left. She didn't tell Jung-min. For a moment, she considered it, remembering the way his voice had gone flat in Winter Bend, the way he'd described what happened to the crew who'd taken her with the same tone other men used for something routine. No remorse. No hesitation. No doubt. He would escalate. Not recklessly. Deliberately. Because protecting her wasn't a gesture for him. It was a principle. And she didn't want that part of his world anywhere near hers. This was her fight. Her industry. Her name on the contract. She wasn't backing down from Miraculous. And she wasn't letting Larson, Abbott, and Cole decide who she became this time. So she kept it to herself. For now. She did not sleep well for 3 nights. On the 4th morning, she came down to find Jung-min's coffee already made. A specific quality of stillness in the kitchen. The kind of stillness she'd learned to read, in the months since Winter Bend, as the stillness of a man who knew something he hadn't said yet. He handed her the coffee. "How's the Miraculous project coming?" he asked. "Really well," she said. "Scope's bigger than I expected." He nodded. His eyes were very steady on hers. She drank her coffee. He said nothing else. The Harrington Gala was the kind of Chicago event that required a dress Jordan did not own. A level of social composure she had to actively maintain. She attended as Jung-min's guest, which meant that every person in the room clocked him first. That particular sequence she'd grown accustomed to. The ripple of awareness that preceded him, the way people rearrange themselves without knowing why. Jordan beside him. The woman attached to that gravitational field. She didn't mind. She had a glass of champagne. A new dress the color of midnight. Business cards in her clutch that said Sanders Strategy Group in clean gold lettering. She was not afraid of this room. She had earned her place in it. She thought, briefly, that the evening might go fine. Then Jung-min was pulled away by a contact he needed to speak with. Jordan found herself alone near the bar. Bob Lander spotted her from across the room. She had forgotten about Bob Lander. She had forgotten that he existed, which was the only reasonable response to a person whose primary function for years had been to make her feel like she was in the wrong room, asking the wrong questions. He was her old division director, Derek's man, Derek's instrument. He was crossing toward her now with the specific expression of someone who had been drinking long enough to feel invincible. "Jordan Sanders." He said her name like a punchline. "How did you get in here?" She held her champagne glass. "Ticket. Like everyone else." "Right." He looked around, confirming his audience, which was one of his favorite things. His voice lifted, carrying the way voices carry in rooms with high ceilings. "Good acoustics. I heard you're running some kind of, what is it? Consulting? One-woman operation." He smiled with his teeth. "Poaching our old clients now. That's all you could manage after 6 years of us carrying you. Can your business even afford an event like this?" Jordan didn't respond. Didn't rise to it. The room had noticed. She felt it, that particular quality of attention. The way a crowd turns toward embarrassment like a plant turning toward light. And the Miraculous contract, he shook his head. Brian Collins always did have poor judgment. The shift happened before she saw him. A change in the room. A subtle tightening. Then Jung-min was there, crossing the room with the calm of a man who had made a decision. Was now implementing it. The crowd parted the way crowds parted for him without ever being told to. He crossed the distance in seconds, grabbed Bob Lander by the throat. Drove him back into the wall. The sound was sharp. Final. The room went silent in the way rooms did when something real happened in them. Not theatrical, not performed, but actual danger. The kind that recalibrated the nervous system of everyone present. Jung-min leaned in close. His voice, when it came, was quiet enough that Jordan could barely hear it. A technique she'd learned to find more frightening than shouting. "If you speak to her again," he said, "in any room, in any context, in any city, I will make certain you don't speak again at all." Jung-min. Her hand on his arm. Her voice careful, low. "Let go." He looked at her over his shoulder. His eyes were dark and flat, and absolutely serious. Jung-min. His grip held for a second longer. Too long. Then he released him. Stepped back. Straightened his jacket. He looked at the room, a single, encompassing look that communicated, without ambiguity, that the evening's entertainment was over. The room looked away. Without another word, he turned. walked out. Bob staggered back, eyes wide, hand at his throat, his voice gone with the air he'd lost. Jordan hesitated only a moment before following. The car ride home was silence with a body, a temperature. Jordan sat on her side of the back seat, looked out the window at Chicago moving past in amber, white. She felt the anger, the fear, the strange, complicated gratitude all occupying the same space in her chest with nowhere to go. At home, the door had barely closed behind them. "You can't do that," she said. He turned. "He was humiliating you." "I know that. I was handling it." "You were standing there letting him." "I was handling it." Her voice came out sharper than she intended. "I've been handling things like that my entire career. I know how to manage a room." "You grabbed him by the throat, Jung-min. In a room full of people who now have a story to tell about us." "Good." His voice was hard. "They can tell it. That's not how it works for me." She set her purse down with more force than necessary. "Not everyone operates in a world where the consequences of a scene like that just disappear. My reputation is not your reputation. What you just did follows me." Something shifted in his face. He was quiet for a moment. "You've been hiding something from me," he said. She felt it land. "Derek came to your office," he continued. His voice had gone quiet the way it went quiet when he was being very careful. "My men told me." Her stomach dropped. "You had me watched." "I have you watched," he corrected. "There's a difference." "No, there isn't." Her voice cracked. "You don't get to monitor my life because you're afraid of losing control." His jaw flexed. "I watch everyone I care about. It's not negotiable." "That's not care," she said. "That's surveillance." He stared at her, something tightening in his jaw. "Why are you so scared of these people?" he asked. She blinked. "Excuse me?" "Larson, Abbott and Cole, Derek, Bob, all of them. You talk about them like they're untouchable." "They're a force in my industry," she snapped. "They decide who survives. They're connected to an impenetrable corporate cabal." "I run a global corporation," he cut in. "And you think they have reach?" "Thank you for the lecture, Jordan. I had no idea how the corporate world works." "It's not the same," she said, voice rising. "We can't all scare the wits out of people to get what we want." His expression changed, a small, sharp wound. "Ouch. Are you implying my company's success is because I intimidate people?" "I don't know what I'm saying," she said, rubbing her forehead. "It's been a long day. I'm exhausted." She picked up her purse. "I'm going to Amber's." "I'll go," he said. She turned. He was already at the door, coat in hand. The expression on his face, not angry, not cold, something more complicated, more painful than either, made her chest tighten in a way she resented. He hesitated. Then, quietly, "Maybe you're not built for my world." The words landed like a blow. He knew it. You could see it. The instant regret, the flicker of, "I shouldn't have said that." But he left anyway. The door closed. Jordan stood in the penthouse alone, the city glowing through the glass. Hated every decision she'd made in the last 3 days. The apartment was quiet when Jung-min returned the next morning. He already knew she wasn't there. Reception had told him she'd left the building early that morning, but seeing were different things. He stepped inside anyway, as if the act of crossing the threshold might undo something. The penthouse felt wrong without her. Too open, too still. He didn't call her name. He didn't need to. He walked to the kitchen, the place she always gravitated toward when she needed to think. That was where he found it. A single piece of paper, folded once, placed in the center of the marble island. Her handwriting was small, neat, steady. "I need some space. I'll be safe. Don't worry." No explanation. No destination. But he knew. Winter Bend. He stood there for a long moment, the note between his fingers, the morning light catching on the edges of the page. Not angry. Not surprised. Just hurting. Hurting in a way he didn't have a name for. He set the note down gently, as if it were something breakable. Exhaled once, a slow, controlled breath that didn't steady him the way it usually did. Then he reached for his phone. Because if she thought distance would make him stop caring, she didn't know him at all. Havenwood Retreat in November looked like something grief had decorated. The pine trees stripped to their architecture, the mountains blunt. white against a sky the color of iron. The paths she'd walked all spring. Summer now cold. Unfamiliar underfoot. Jordan stood at the edge of the gravel drive with her suitcase beside her, the air sharp enough to sting her lungs. Aunt Willa had left the porch light on, a warm square of gold in the blue-gray dusk, but Jordan didn't go inside yet. She needed a moment to let the silence settle, to let the city fall off her, to let him fall off her. She wasn't sure which part hurt more, the fight, or the fact that she believed he could say something like that. Mean it. Maybe you're not built for my world. The words had followed her through the airport, through the flight, through the drive up the mountain. They sat under her ribs like a bruise she couldn't stop pressing. Inside, Aunt Willa hugged her without questions. Uncle Silas carried her suitcase upstairs. They didn't ask why she'd come early. They didn't ask how long she was staying. They didn't ask anything at all. Winterbend had always known how to hold her without demanding explanations. She slept for 12 hours. The next few days blurred together. She walked the same trails, sat in the same silence. She didn't check her phone. She didn't open her email. She had left Jane a message saying she was taking some time off, would be back before the Miraculous project began. She tried not to think about him. It didn't work. On the fourth day, she walked into town for coffee. Main Street in November was quiet. A few trucks angled along the curb. The bakery's windows fogged from the ovens. The hardware store's bell chiming whenever someone went in or out. She kept her hands in her coat pockets, her breath visible in the cold. She was halfway to the cafe when she saw them. Two men standing outside the feed store, talking, laughing, shoulders hunched against the cold. Familiar. Too familiar. Her body reacted before her mind did. A jolt of cold that had nothing to do with the weather. A tightening in her throat. The world narrowing to a pinpoint. They turned at the same time. Their faces changed. Not hostile. Not threatening. Just startled. Jordan. One of them said, voice low, uncertain. She couldn't speak. She couldn't breathe. She swallowed. You're alive. They exchanged a look, confusion, then something like guilt. Yeah, the taller one said. We didn't think we'd ever see you again. She stared at them, her pulse loud in her ears. I thought, her voice broke. I thought you were dead. The shorter one shook his head. We weren't part of that. We'd never have touched you. You know that. Her stomach dropped. The guys who took you, he continued, they weren't from here. They came in from out of town, tried to take over. Started doing things we never would have done. Jordan felt the ground tilt under her. And after you were rescued, he hesitated. Those guys got wiped out. Not by us. By the local rival crew. Turf thing. The taller one added quietly. We went into hiding. Didn't know who was next. Only came back because we heard it was safe. Safe. The word hit her like a blow. She forced herself to ask, even though she already knew the answer. Why did you think I knew? They looked at her like the question didn't make sense. Because the man who came for you. A shrug. A glance. A truth spoken softly. We figured he told you. Jordan stood there on Main Street, the cold biting her cheeks, the mountains looming behind her, and felt something inside her crack open. He hadn't lied. He hadn't hidden anything. She had filled in the blanks with fear. She had built a monster out of trauma. She had never asked him what happened. She had never given him the chance to tell her. I didn't know, she whispered. The boys nodded, awkward. She walked back to Havenwood Retreat in a daze. The cold didn't touch her. The mountains didn't register. The world felt distant, muffled, unreal. She went straight to her room, closed the door. Sat on the edge of the bed with her hands in her lap. She had spent these past months believing he'd wiped out an entire gang because of her. She had carried guilt for deaths that never happened. She had feared a version of him that didn't exist. She had pushed him away because she was afraid of what she thought he was capable of. And all this time, he had only eliminated the men who hurt her. Not the boys she grew up with. Not the people she mourned. Not the ones who didn't touch her. He had been precise. Controlled. Measured. And she had never asked. Her chest tightened. Her eyes burned. She whispered into the quiet room. I was wrong. The words felt heavier than anything she'd carried in months. Later that evening, she sat in her aunt's kitchen with both hands wrapped around a mug of something herbal. Restorative. Willa's answer to most things. The warmth seeped into her palms, grounding her in a way she hadn't realized she needed. Tell me, her aunt said. So she did. All of it. Derek's office visit, the slap, her silence, the gala, the fight. Willa listened without interrupting, which was its own kind of gift. When Jordan finished, she stared down at the steam rising from her mug. I found out the local crew, from when I was taken last spring, they weren't killed. Jung-min had their leaders removed, but he didn't have the gang members killed. Willa waited, the way she always did when she knew the real confession was still coming. I accused him of going scorched earth, Jordan said quietly. I kept my distance over it. And she swallowed. He let me think the worst of him. He didn't correct it. Why do you think that is? Willa asked. Jordan turned her mug in her hands, watching the tea ripple. Because he thought I needed to be afraid of something. Because he thought I needed space. Because he thought I wasn't ready to hear the truth. Because, Willa said gently, you needed something to be afraid of. And he gave you permission to use him for it. The fire in the hearth popped. Outside, the mountains were invisible now, swallowed by the dark. The whole house felt like it was holding its breath. You do this, Willa said softly. When things get big, when they get real, you find a reason to run. It's not weakness. It's how you survived. But Jordan, baby, she reached across the table and covered her niece's hands with both of hers. You're not surviving anymore. You're living. Those are different things, and they require different responses. Jordan looked at the fire, the flames shifting and collapsing in slow, steady movements. Her throat tightened. He never lied to you, Willa said. Not once. Not about who he is, not about what he does, not about what you mean to him. The man who hurt you in Chicago. He lied to your face for 6 years while organizing your destruction. A pause. Don't punish Jung-min for Derek Cole's sins. Jordan sat with that for a long time, the words settling into her like stones finding their place. She thought about the closet he'd cleared without mentioning it. The coffee already made. The way he watched her in rooms like she was the thing he'd oriented his compass toward without deciding to. The drawer she'd filled. The key she'd accepted. The almost word that lived between them like something waiting to be named. She was not a woman who ran. Not anymore. He was already on his way. He hadn't needed her to ask. She heard his car before she saw it. Tires on the gravel drive, headlights cutting through the pine trees, the particular black SUV that meant him as distinctly as his footsteps. She'd been sitting on the front porch of the guest cabin in her coat, hands in her lap, watching the morning settle over the trees, like she already knew he was coming. He stepped out. The cold mountain morning reorganized itself around him the way spaces always did. She stood. He crossed the distance between them without hurrying. She met him halfway. She walked into his arms before either of them said anything. He wrapped around her, both arms full. Certain, his chin dropping to the top of her head. She felt the tension in his chest ease by degrees, like something that had been wound too tight, slowly remembering how to breathe. Is this what you're going to keep doing? He said. Low, rough, threaded through with something that was not quite annoyance. Running here every time we fight? She laughed against his chest. I mean, probably. A long pause. His arms tightened. Would you like me to burn this town down, so you have nowhere to run from me? She pulled back enough to look at his face. He was watching her with that expression. The one that contained the almost smile. The warmth he didn't show anyone else. Something enormous. Careful underneath both. She knew he was teasing. She also knew, with the precise certainty she had about him now, that he would level every structure in Winterbend if she asked. I love Winterbend, she said. Then stop leaving me for it. She kissed him. He made a sound low in his chest. Kissed her back like she'd been gone for months instead of days, his hands finding her face the way they always did. Holding her like she was both fragile. Necessary, like losing her was not a category of event he was prepared to entertain. When they finally broke apart, she pressed her forehead to his jaw, said, I need to tell you something. I know. All of it this time. I know. His hand moved through her hair. I'll listen. She told him everything. Not the version she'd been parceling out in manageable pieces, not the edited account that started with the setup. Skip the months before it. The full history. The years at Larson, Abbott and Cole where she'd been good. She'd known she was good. She'd believed, with the particular faith of someone who hasn't yet learned how workplaces destroy people, that good work was enough protection. The discovery of the financial irregularities. The decision to report them. Made in a week, undone in a day when Derek had called her into his office. Explained, with perfect calm, what was going to happen to her reputation if she pursued it. She'd pursued it anyway. They'd destroyed her anyway. I should have fought harder, she said. I should have lawyered up immediately. Instead I just left. I let them win because leaving felt safer than the fight. She was sitting cross-legged on the bed in the guest cabin. Jung-min was beside her, his shoulder warm against hers. He had not said a word for the last 20 minutes except to indicate, with small sounds, the occasional pressure of his hand, that he was still there. You protected yourself, he said. That's not losing. It felt like losing. I know. He turned to look at her. His eyes were very dark, very steady. It's not. She exhaled. I was afraid, she said. I've been afraid for a long time. And I kept finding reasons to be afraid of you, specifically, because being afraid of you felt safer than being afraid of what I want. A small pause. I filled in the blanks, she said quietly. And I got it wrong. He was quiet. What do you want? He asked. She looked at him. The ink at his collar, the unhurried, absolute attention that he only ever pointed in her direction. You, she said. I want you. Clearly, openly, actually, no more half unpacked, half guarded. She let out a breath. All in. The expression that crossed his face was the most unguarded thing she had ever seen on him. It lasted only a moment before it was replaced by something more controlled, but she'd seen it. The relief, the want. The thing he'd been carrying since Chicago with the same discipline he applied to everything, waiting for her to catch up. He cupped her face in both hands, kissed her softly, then less softly. The mountain cold outside, the fire in the hearth, the accumulated weight of all the months they'd been circling each other, it all arrived at once. She pulled him close. He came willingly. The night deepened in the way of things that had been waiting long enough. Outside, the pines were silver in the dark. Inside, they were finally home. They flew back the next morning. Chicago appeared below them through the jet window the way it always did from the air. The grid of it, the lake vast. Gray to the east, the skyline rising from the flatness like something that had decided to exist through sheer force of will. Jordan watched it grow. Felt something she hadn't felt about this city in 6 years. Anticipation. Jung-min was beside her, reading something on his phone with the focused quiet he brought to everything. She looked at him for a moment before looking back at the window. This man who had come for her in the mountains, who had held her while she said the hard things, who had listened without flinching, kissed her after like she was something worth keeping. She faced forward. Chicago was hers. She'd decided. The Miraculous project officially began the following Monday. Jordan arrived at the offices on Michigan Avenue at 8:30 with her laptop bag over one shoulder. The particular calm of someone who had prepared so thoroughly that nerves had nowhere left to live. Brian Collins met her in the lobby, shook her hand and said, "Ready?" And she said, yes, and meant it completely. The work was good. The kind of good that reminded her why she'd chosen this in the first place. The particular satisfaction of a problem with enough complexity to be interesting. Enough structure to be solvable. She worked long days. Came home to the penthouse. Ate whatever Jung-min had ordered. Told him about the parts she could tell him about. He listened. Occasionally said something so precisely insightful about organizational dynamics that she forgot, for a moment, that he hadn't been in the room. How do you do that? She asked one evening. He looked up from whatever he was reading. Do what? See straight to the center of something you weren't there for. He considered this with the seriousness he applied to questions she asked genuinely. I've been reading people in rooms my entire life, he said. The industry changes. The people don't. She looked at him across the living room. The penthouse dark beyond the windows, the city glowing below them, the lamp catching the angle of his face. Thought. I almost didn't have this. The thought arrived without drama, without the anxious edge it might have carried months ago. Just a fact. Just gratitude. Quiet. Whole. She went back to her laptop. He He went back to his reading. Outside, Chicago carried on. They were not without friction. There was the evening she came home to find that 2 vendors she'd nearly written off for the Miraculous project, booked solid for the next 18 months, had quietly made themselves available. She stood in the kitchen, the notification open on her phone. Let the silence stretch before she asked, "Did you have anything to do with the Miraculous vendor situation?" Jung-min was at the counter. He didn't look up immediately. Then he did. "I made some calls," he said. "Nothing that touched your contract. Nothing that touched your work." Jung-min. "They weren't available," he said simply. "Now they are." She held his gaze. He held hers. Neither of them looked away. "I need you to tell me," she said finally, "when you do things like that. I'm not asking you to stop being who you are. I'm asking you not to let me find out from a push notification." A pause. "Fair," he said. It wasn't a perfect resolution. It wasn't meant to be. But she had said the thing she needed to say. He had heard it. The evening continued. Dinner, the couch, her falling asleep against his shoulder. He turned the television down without waking her. She was learning what it looked like when 2 people were genuinely trying. 3 weeks into the Miraculous project, on a Thursday afternoon that had given her no particular reason to expect anything, Jung-min came to her office. He did this occasionally now, appeared in her doorway with the quiet authority of a man who understood that this was her space. Entered it accordingly. He never stayed long. He brought coffee sometimes, or didn't. Sat in the chair across from her desk. Asked 1 or 2 questions about her day, with the focused attention he gave everything. She found she looked forward to it in the specific way you looked forward to things you hadn't known you needed. Jane had long since stopped being startled by him. He was there when the courier arrived. Jordan was at her desk, going over the final phase of the Miraculous project timeline. Jung-min was in the chair across from her, jacket off, reading something on his phone in the easy silence they had built between them. Jane knocked once, opened the door, and said with the careful neutrality of someone delivering something she didn't fully understand, "This just came for you. Courier." They said it was time-sensitive. The envelope was thick, formal. The return address was printed in the upper left corner in the particular font that meant this is not correspondence. This is a declaration. Jordan already knew what it was before she took it. She had felt it in Derek's silence these past weeks, the specific quiet of a man who had stopped making noise because he had decided to make something worse instead. She took it from Jane. "Thank you." Jane withdrew, closed the door. The office was very still. Jordan turned the envelope over in her hands once, then opened it with a letter opener from her desk drawer. A clean, deliberate movement. Unfolded the document inside. Baines and McNeil, attorneys at law, acting on behalf of Larson, Abbott and Cole. She read it slowly. All of it. The language was precise. Aggressive. She understood every word of it. What every word was designed to do. The financial claims, the non-compete violation, the professional damages alleged in figures that were meant to make her feel small. Outmatched. Alone in a city that had already swallowed her once. She set it down on the desk. She looked up. Jung-min had not moved. He was watching her with an expression that was not quite an expression. Composed. Still. The particular blankness of a man who had already seen this moment coming from a long way off. Had decided, long ago, how it would end. He was not worried. She could see that with complete clarity. Not performing calm. Not suppressing alarm. Simply, genuinely unconcerned in a way that lived deeper than reassurance. "Do you want me to end it?" he asked. She held his gaze for a moment. Then she looked back down at the document on her desk. The city hummed outside her window. Somewhere below, Chicago moved through its afternoon with complete indifference to the piece of paper sitting in front of her. The afternoon light falling across her desk in long amber lines. Her name printed at the top of a lawsuit filed by men who had been trying to make her disappear for almost a year. Had not yet managed it. She placed her hand flat on the document. Exhaled once. "No. A beat. This one's mine."